Hey Kings, and welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel, and today we're starting a new campaign. Yes, another Total War campaign, playing as Italy. Now, with the last campaign when we played as Greece, we basically, with the initial goal, we tried to recreate the Eastern Roman Empire, or at least the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, the Latin Greek Empire, the Greco-Latin Empire, whatever you want to call it, except for the B word. We don't really say that aloud around here, but, we ostensibly try to recreate the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, which survived until the 15th century. Now, with this campaign, since we're playing Napoleon Total War, and since we're playing Italy, I thought it would be nice to try and recreate the western portion of the Roman Empire, because, well, it's fitting. In Empire Total War, obviously, the regions or the provinces that were relevant to the Eastern Roman Empire had a much more of a focus. There were many more provinces in Empire Total War that were relevant to the Eastern Roman Empire. Within that game, for example, you had Anatolia, you had the Levant, you had Egypt, obviously. But within Napoleon Total War, we obviously don't have that, because it's only Europe. And that is an interesting fact, to be sure. However, what it does mean is that these provinces have much more of a detailed focus. For example, in Empire Total War, France was only essentially two regions. You had the entirety of France, and then you had Alsace-Lorraine, which can be constituted as a German territory if you want. But in Napoleon Total War, obviously France is split up into many minor provinces. So I think it actually is a good game to try and recreate the West Roman Empire. So the official goal, or the initial goal, or the overall goal of this campaign is going to be to try and recreate the West Roman Empire, and that obviously is going to be a very complex task, because this is played on Darth mod. We are using Darth mod with this campaign, whereas with the Empire Total War we use the Minor Factions Revenge mod, if I remember correctly. Yes, I'm pretty sure. With this one using Darth mod for Napoleon Total War, more specifically version 2.65, the Epic Edition, which should be the latest version, I'm pretty sure, because it hasn't been updated in a couple of years. Napoleon Total War is obviously a very old game, so doesn't really receive as many updates to its mods as it used to back like 10 years ago, let's say. So now we're using Darth mod for this one. And we're also playing on hard difficulty for battles. However, we're playing on normal difficulty for a campaign. One of the reasons being is that it's Darth mod, and Darth mod is supposed to make the campaign a little bit more difficult. However, another reason is that when you actually scale up the difficulty in Napoleon Total War, you get a more percentage-based or stat-based difficulty spikes, or more stat-based boosts that the other countries around you get. And what that means is that since France, or the French Empire, is already incredibly powerful, the percentage-based stat boosts they get are exponentially enhanced. What that means is that if you're not playing France and you play on a higher difficulty, what that means is that France is going to conquer the entire map. And, well, that's cool and everything, it's very, in theme with Napoleon Total War, because it's Napoleon. What I find is that it basically not only nerfs you, but it essentially nerfs all the other members of or the other countries in Europe, or the members of the coalition, essentially, which is Britain, Austria, Russia, and later on Prussia as well, because France is so powerful. I'm not entirely sure if the game checks for what the country the player is playing as, whether it does anything with him not playing France. That means that France gets a lot of boosts, or if it just checks flat out. But with France being so powerful, if we were to enhance the difficulty, what that means, in my experience of playing this game for 300 hours, most of it spent on campaign, what that means is that if you crank up the difficulty of the campaign, France kills everyone. if you crank up the difficulty of the battles, it's relatively fair on the campaign map, but you still get a challenge. And I actually like that because I obviously don't mind the challenge in the battles that much, because the AI is still really terrible in the battle maps, even though they said, you know, numerous times that they updated it for Napoleon from Empire, and even Darth mod is supposed to update and upgrade the AI in the battles. Doesn't actually do all that much. It enhances it a tiny bit, but not all that much. So I don't actually mind the stat boosts that the AI gets when it comes to battles. However, as I said, on the campaign map, the AI just gets cheats, and what that means is that France is a little bit too powerful for its boots, and that's incredibly annoying. Because in mid game you're just playing against France. Essentially, it's a 1v1, and that's not actually fun. Yeah, that's not actually fun. So campaign on normal, battles on hard, and Darth mode is supposed to make things harder anyway. And we're not exactly in the best position, because when we're playing as Italy, we only have 2 cities, or essentially 2 provinces, in the Alpine region of Italy, or in northern Italy, essentially. So what that means is that we're gonna have to engage in a lot of subterfuge. We're gonna have to trade with a lot of people. We're gonna have to try and get in good graces with the French at the beginning, because for some reason the French AI just automatically attacks you, even though the Italian states were actually on somewhat friendly terms with the French after the initial invasion of France by Napoleon. Obviously, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not very well versed on my Napoleonic history. So, but I do believe that the Italian states that we actually are playing as right now were more of a puppet state to France. So this one, it's sort of a strange conundrum, but nevertheless, we are in a very weak position at the beginning, so we have to sort of suck up to all the larger people around us. And what that means is that we're gonna have to be friendly with, or try to be as friendly as possible with the French, and also the Austrians, but not so much with the Austrians, because the Austrians already have to defend against the Ottomans and the French at the same time, and all the minor German states, more notably Württemberg and I think Bavaria? Not entirely sure that they are fighting against when it comes to just in general their situation. They're essentially surrounded, but not exactly. So we're gonna suck up to them a tiny bit at the beginning, and then maybe use the French to take some provinces, and yeah, then backstab the French. But the initial goal of this campaign, because obviously we are trying to have some, you know, somewhat of a some cohesive step line when it comes to actually taking over the nations that we need to take over to recreate the Western Roman Empire more rather. The first step in this glorious advance of Italy is going to be actually taking care of the Italian peninsula and getting some cash on hand. So that means we don't actually have that big of a challenge initially, because the Italian states, or the states within the Italian peninsula, while they are allied with the various major nations in Europe, they aren't actually all that powerful, and just with a little bit of subterfuge, you know, paying money for them to break their alliances and everything like that, we can actually just, well, take them over. And Rome is actually very wide open at the beginning. And while it is controlled by the papal states, they are minor nations. Now, the thing about minor nations in Napoleon and Empire Total War is that they can usually somehow, through cheating, because minor nations in Napoleon and Empire Total War obviously cheat, which AI doesn't cheat in these games, but they have somehow the ability to maintain like 2 full stack armies of actually pretty decent units, like just pretty high quality line infantry, some good artillery, and some good cavalry. On top of that, they also have pretty decent generals. So the initial step, while on the campaign map, it's actually relatively easy. When it comes to actual battles, it's going to be a little bit tough. Not as tough as fighting off against Napoleon and his entire army, or the Austrian army, but it's going to be a little bit tough. Much tougher than, for example, when we were playing as Greece and Empire Total War in the last campaign, where we had to basically kill off a dying empire. We now have to face off against cheating AI, a dying empire of sorts in terms of the Austrian Empire, or the Austrians in general, as well as two very big empires, that being the rising French Empire as well as the Russian Empire. So these are very big opponents we have to go up against, and to do that we really have to truly embrace what it means to be a Roman. Because in the last campaign we did play as Greece, and traditionally in the ancient times, Greece was known as this sort of more liberal-minded place, and so, except for like Sparta and that whole bunch. But, so from like tradition, and the stereotypical nature of ancient Greece, for example Athens, we do see more of a liberal approach to everything, so, well, not exactly, but you know what I mean. And so we cranked the taxes way down. Well, in this campaign, we're gonna be cranking the taxes way up, because we're trying to roleplay as more of the Latin approach to this whole Roman ideal, right? Very militaristic, very heavy taxation, everything like that. Both on the nobility, which actually, when you very highly tax the nobility, they don't usually revolt. Because you're an absolutist monarchy, the nobility tend to be happy with you, even if you tax them 100%. Now, from a long-term perspective, the taxation of the nobility might have some repercussions, but from my experience of the last campaign, where we cranked those taxes down just completely, it doesn't actually matter. The low taxation model is kind of a failure in my eyes after the last campaign, so now we're gonna try the heavy taxation model and see how it goes. Because, well, Rome, the Roman Empire, right after Caesar or Caesar took over the whole thing, or even during Augustus, you could say that's the stereotypical Roman army, Roman mindset. And yeah, it's going to be very tyrannical, very militaristic, everything like that. So we're going to roleplay that. You can't actually really roleplay that in Napoleon Total War and Empire Total War, because, well, it's a Total War game. It's not exactly a political simulator. So, but we're gonna at least try to do something like that. And yeah. But we're also going to have to think about what we're going to do after we take over Italy. So overall, when it comes to the initial battle plan, or the campaign plan, I think that obviously taking over Italy, taking Rome, taking Sicily, everything like that, Corsica and Sardinia, those are very high up on the list, because we do want a very solid sort of base of operations, and the Italian peninsula provides that. While you might think that it's it's poking out into the Mediterranean, it's sort of easy to invade, the AI never actually invades, which is kind of interesting. They never do naval invasions, and they do annoy you with their navies. Definitely they do annoy you, but they never really do naval invasions. And so, while we're building up this army here, I think that initially taking over Italy is going to be extremely beneficial, because there's some good resources there. There's a lot of money to be made from that, and well, we just have more military bases then, and naval bases, so we can launch our naval invasions. But actually, when it comes to plans after that, I think again we're gonna join Napoleon on his little drift across Europe, and join him in attacking the Austrians. Because when it comes to the provinces the Western Roman Empire held, we do have some provinces that are very crucial and very hard to get, and it's going to be very beneficial to get them on the back of Napoleon. We're basically going to let him do the heavy lifting. For example, we need Croatia, and we need Vienna. We also should need the western portion of Hungary, but that's sort of a disputed thing in Napoleon Total War, because you can't actually just conquer the western portion of Hungary. You have to conquer the entirety of Hungary, and we're not really going to do that. So we're gonna settle for Vienna, I think, and for some territories, maybe deeper in the Balkans, not entirely sure. But after that, I think we have to take on the Spanish, because they are relatively weak if you compare them to the British or the French. They're relatively weak. Their armies aren't that great, their units aren't that great. They are sort of even in the terms of their economic position, they're not in the best position. and they're definitely easier to beat than France. So we're gonna have to break up that alliance down the line and invade Spain and Portugal as well. Now, this puts us in a very precarious position because this means that we are going to have to invade an ally of France and also an ally of Britain. And we're going to be probably at war with the coalition when we actually, join France against Austria. So this whole situation is very, it's sounding really difficult. Just when I'm laying it out here, it's sounding very difficult because we have to fight off against, well, a lot of very big empires or very powerful nations, very powerful factions right at the beginning, as a very minor nation initially. So it's a very ambitious goal, but I think it actually can be accomplished. Now, as for the regions of the West Roman Empire that were not present within Napoleon Total War, most notably the African regions, I think we can compensate by just conquering the entirety of Britain way down the line, because obviously the sort of the stretch of the West Roman Empire, sort of 100 to 150 years before its downfall. Let's just think about the stretch of the empire, right? Well, during Attila Total War, essentially. You could say that the stretch within their British territories, basically, they only had an empire up until the Hadrian Wall, and so we're gonna conquer the Scottish and everything like that as a compensation for not being able to do anything in Africa. But yeah, I think the first step of our glorious advance here is actually going to be taking out Sardinia. Because taking out Rome right now is going to be, well, it's going to be kind of annoying, kind of tough, and I really do want sort of a more defensible position, or sort of an independent economic base right there in the middle of the Mediterranean, which can basically just be used to generate money, and also sort of a nice harbor for our ships that are going to be stationed the various trade nodes, which actually is probably going to be the main way that we're gonna earn money. Obviously, we can just sell off our technologies and trade with the various nations and try and buy some provinces and everything like that, but I think the trade nodes are really what's going to be keeping us afloat. Apart from obviously the extremely high taxation which we are going to impose on all of our subjects. But since this is a post-commentary, I can just skip to the Battle of Sardinia, so we don't have to watch the Ottomans dancing around. Psych, it's a Total War game, we just auto-resolve it. Yeah, that's right. They were really weak. I didn't really think it was that worthwhile to just play out that battle. One thing that Empire and Napoleon really have going against them, in terms of just their viability as Total War games, is that the battles take so long. I've been playing some Rome 1 recently, because, well, why not? Rome 1 is always a good game to play if you actually manage to get it running, because it's relatively unstable on modern systems. And one thing that game really, what really amazed me going back to it, and even some of the more recent titles, for example Warhammer 2, is just how quick the battles are compared to Napoleon and Empire. And this is just by design. Obviously the battles within this time period took a very, very long time. But it also sort of discourages you from playing these battles, because when a battle that you're absolutely and incredibly sure that you're going to win, even you win it in an auto-resolve fairly easily, if you have to spend 40 minutes playing that battle, because, well, it just takes a long time to shoot all of the enemies, right? And it takes a long time to reload the muskets and everything like that. If it takes 40 minutes to defeat an opponent, I mean, why not just auto-resolve? You know, that's a very big sort of no-no for me when it comes to Empire and Napoleon. Apart from that, the games are probably some of my favorites, especially Empire because of the scale, but Napoleon basically on an equal measure because of the time period. Really love the time period, really love the the sort of the tactical approach to battles. And by the same token, obviously Shogun 2 Total War is also one of my Shogun 2 Fall of the Samurai, more rather, is one of my favorites, because I just love this style of the combat. But at the same time, it's relatively annoying because the battles just take so long, even though you're absolutely certain that you've won and there's absolutely no way the opponents can do anything about it. So sometimes it is a little bit annoying compared to like Rome 1 or even Rome 2. Attila, the battles there are just so quick. And, well, in Attila, your units can rout almost immediately, so, especially as the Romans, which is quite disgraceful, but there we go. It's, in Empire and Napoleon, sometimes it's just better to auto-resolve. And I'll try to auto-resolve as few times as possible, definitely at the beginning stages of this campaign, because, well, it's relatively important to have a pretty decent start if you have this sort of a big goal in mind as taking over or taking back the western portion of the Roman Empire and basically recreating the initial stages of the Roman Empire when they only had some provinces in Iberia, some provinces in Greece, which we might take over just as sort of a bonus, but I don't think we will, because, well, I don't really want to fight the Ottomans, and if we really want to have good relations with the French, we should probably befriend the Ottomans at the beginning, and maybe even try and maintain an alliance with the Ottomans and break up the alliance between the Ottomans and the French. Because the Ottomans, while they're a little bit annoying in the game in general, because they do like to raid your trading routes, they do serve as a good bulwark against, for example, the Russians. If we ever get to fighting the Russians, which we probably will, let's be honest here, it's going to be a good bulwark when it comes to just fending off against the Russians. So it's not exactly going to be, well, in our best interest to antagonize an additional power apart from France, Austria, Spain, Britain, probably Prussia, probably Russia, the entirety of the Italian peninsula, as well as Portugal later down the line. So it's probably not going to be a great idea to also add, also we are going to antagonize the Batavian Republic somewhere down the line. So it's probably not going to be a great idea to have to face against the Ottomans as well, because then it's just going to turn into a full map conquest, and as fun as that sounds, at that point, it's not about recreating the Western Roman Empire, it's about recreating the entirety of the Roman Empire. And so, as a stretch goal, maybe, if the campaign goes greatly, amazingly, maybe we'll do that. We'll see how things go. But at this point, I'm not really all that keen on capturing Constantinople, or recapturing Constantinople, more rather, and doing all that. So, yeah, at this point, we're going to try and play nicely with the Ottomans. But here we go, it's finally time to take back Rome, take back what is rightfully ours, and yeah, what did I say? They have some really good infantry there, some really good cavalry, and some really good artillery. So yeah, this is exactly what we're up against, and that's basically a little bit unfair. In this campaign, I also try not to do the starving out strategy that I did so often when it came to the Greek campaign, because I feel that we're gonna try to be a little bit more aggressive with this campaign, because obviously the time limit in this campaign is not as generous, let's say, as that in Empire Total War. Now you can still get a lot of things done, but being a little bit more aggressive is also going to be sort of more in theme when it comes to the, more Latin approach to this whole question. And while we might take more losses, or it's not going to be as tactical, it's not going to be as sort of neat and beautiful and everything like that as just starving your opponent out and waiting for them to attack you, and then just camping and nullifying their artillery advantage. I think it's going to be a little bit more decisive, a little bit more vigorous, everything like that. All the buzzwords that you can think of. And so, yeah, it's we're just gonna assault the Papal States, because why not? They're holding Rome. Rome is Roman. Rome is ours. We are Roman. And yeah, we're gonna take it back. Thank you very much. So Rome is going to be in the hand of the Neo-Roman Empire, which is called Italy for some reason, but that's just, that's just fake propaganda by, I don't know, the French, let's say. That's just neo-propaganda. Neo-propaganda? That's just propaganda by the French, or, you know, Gauls. That's just some neo-Gallic empire. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the French Empire actually has quite a lot of similarities to after, you know, Caesar or Kaiser took over took over the Republic. So it's you know, the Gauls have learned from our ways. Okay, they have learned a tiny bit, but the French actually are Latin, you know, aren't they? So okay, this is just. It's weird. Okay, it's a mix of various ideas mixed together, but needless to say, we're taking back Rome because Rome is Roman and the AI is trash. They're just swiveling around in the middle of a whole bunch of musket fire, and that's obviously wonderful. Now, one thing that I'll say that I really like about Napoleon Total War Darth mod more specifically is that they do re-add fire by rank. That's one thing that always sort of miffed me about in Napoleon Total War sort of back in the day in general, or it's been 10 years, so it's always miffed me about Napoleon Total War is that you don't get fire by rank, even though you spent so long in Empire Total War. Look at those cowards. So long researching them, the fire by rank technology, you don't get to play with it in Napoleon Total War. It's kind of a sad thing, isn't it? You know, even though I think it should be sort of as a selectable option for your infantry. I think it should be sort of an option that you could play with, or you could not play with it. You know, it should be sort of custom selectable by the player, which I think is how they actually handled it in Follow the Samurai, if I remember correctly. So that game got it right at least. Like 6 years later, another bunch of cowards, man. Our initial starting infantry in this game is not the best, but I do think that this is a combination of it being on hard difficulty in Napoleon Total War and using Darth mod. So those three things sort of are causing our infantry, valiant Roman legionaries, to just run. And so we're gonna have to get a look at that, and get some better infantry, definitely. A bit more sooner than later. It's going to be better to get those good infantry sooner than later. But we'll just have to see how things go. But as you can see, we're totally thrashing the Papal States. They stand absolutely no chance because while they might rout one or two divisions or one or two units, it's really nothing compared to the overall battle. We'll be completely surrounding them, and we're going to crush them, absolutely. An absolutely glorious victory, so now we own Sardinia, and we also own Rome, and we crush the Papal States. Now, one thing that's actually kind of interesting, since the Papal States are the Papal States, they're Catholic, does this mean that we are revolting against the Catholic faith? Does that mean that we're pagan again? That's an interesting thought to ponder. So, okay. But anyway, I think this sort of initial conquest is going to be good enough for the first episode, or the first part, whatever you want to call it. We're also at war with the Kingdom of Naples, so that is going to be the next step towards actually advancing our sort of, you know, Reconquista, I suppose, the reconquest of the entire Italian peninsula. And yeah, so thanks, Kings, for watching, and see you next time.